Your grandmother never measured a thing. She stood over that cast iron skillet, tossed in a handful of this and a pinch of that, and somehow every plate came out perfect. For decades, the food industry told black families their kitchen methods were wrong, unsafe, outdated. They wanted us reaching for boxed mixes and frozen dinners instead. But now the same food world that dismissed these methods is quietly borrowing them. Number 31 on this list disappeared from mainstream cookbooks decades ago, but it turns a single cheap cut of meat into something you'd find on a restaurant menu today. And number 9 on this list was labeled dangerous by food companies, yet it kept families fed through entire winters without a refrigerator. These weren't mistakes or old wives' tales. These were solutions, born in kitchens where nothing went to waste and every single meal had to count. So hit subscribe and pull up a chair, because here are 60 banned African-American cooking tricks scientists now say were genius.
Wild persimmon bread carried the sweetness of the land itself, made from fruit gathered by hand in the fall. Families waited until the persimmons were soft and ripe, their astringency gone, then mashed the pulp into batter with flour, eggs, and spices. The bread baked into loaves that were dense, fragrant, and naturally sweet. Foraging for persimmons was a seasonal ritual, with children climbing trees and filling baskets under the autumn sun. The fruit was free, abundant, and full of vitamins, making it a precious resource when money for sugar or store-bought sweets was scarce. Wild persimmon bread tasted like the season, a warm reminder that even hard times could offer comfort. It often appeared on holiday tables, stretching humble ingredients into a dish that felt special. Today, it is nearly forgotten, overshadowed by modern quick breads like banana bread. Yet the memory of wild persimmon bread connects us to resourcefulness, tradition, and the joy of turning foraged fruit into nourishment. Each slice told the story of making the most of what nature gave.
Number 16, pouring the batter into hot fat for the sizzle ring. There is a sound a good cook waits for, and this trick is built around it. Before the batter ever went in, a spoonful of lard or bacon grease was dropped into the already screaming pan and swirled until it shimmered and nearly smoked. The grease had to be hot enough to ripple, almost ready to burn. When the batter hit that pool of fat, it sizzled around the rim and climbed the sides, frying the outer edge while the center baked. That gave the loaf a crisp lacquered ring all the way around, the part everybody fought over at the table. The fat also greased the pan so the bread lifted out whole, never tearing or sticking to the iron. Skip this step and the batter just sat there, soaking instead of searing, and the edges came out soft and pale. The hot fat pour was the difference between plain cornbread and the kind people remembered. It cost almost nothing, just a spoon of grease and a little nerve to let the pan get that hot. Drop the fat in first and listen for the sizzle before you pour. Number 22, soaking dried beans overnight with a teaspoon of baking soda in the water. A Memphis kitchen in 1962. Big Mama dropped a pound of dried pintos into a chipped enamel bowl, covered them with cold water, and stirred in a single teaspoon of soda from the orange box on the shelf. The beans drank the water, the skins softened. The soda neutralized the gas compounds that had ruined a Sunday afternoon. By morning, the beans had doubled in size. She drained them, rinsed them once, and simmered them with a smoked ham hock and one chopped onion. The pot took 90 minutes instead of 4 hours. She saved gas, she saved time, she saved your granddaddy the embarrassment of a long car ride home from church. The trick traveled with her family from Tennessee to Detroit during the Great Migration, and her granddaughter was still doing it in a Cleveland apartment in 1991. Number 22, seasoning the heavy iron pan with bacon fat. The heavy black pan on the back of Big Mama's stove was older than her grown children, and it shone like wet stone every morning. After every meal, she rinsed it clean with hot water, never soap, dried it on a hot burner so no bead of moisture could sit on the metal, and rubbed a thin film of bacon fat across the cooking surface with a folded square of paper bag. That single thin coat, baked into the iron by the residual heat, was what kept the pan from rusting and kept the next batch of cornbread from sticking. By the end of a decade, the surface was as slick as glass. By the end of 3 decades, the pan was an heirloom. The science behind it is simple. Animal fat polymerizes under heat into a slick, durable layer that bonds to the iron at the molecular level. Big Mama did not need the word polymerize. She knew that bacon fat made the pan behave, and that lard worked too in a pinch, and that vegetable oil never quite gave you the same finish. More than that, she knew the pan itself was an inheritance. The skillet she used had been her mother's and her mother's mother's before that. Every meal cooked in it left a faint trace of itself in the seasoning. So the cornbread you ate on a Tuesday in 1972 carried something of every Sunday dinner that came before. The iron held the memory the same way the family held the recipes, and she handed both down to whichever daughter showed up most often in the kitchen. By federal census data, more than 70% of Black Southern households in 1950 owned at least one heavy iron pan, and most of those pans are still cooking today. That is a survival rate no non-stick pan will ever match. Reviving stale bread with water and heat was how Black grandmothers refused to let anything go to waste in their kitchens. When a loaf had gone past its prime, dry and crumbly where it once was soft, Grandma ran it quickly under the faucet, getting the crust damp but not soaked through. She placed the moistened loaf directly in a hot oven for just a few minutes, watching carefully. Steam regenerated inside the bread, rehydrating starches that had gone hard and crusty. The result was bread tasting nearly fresh, with crisp crust and soft interior that seemed impossible given its previous state. This trick saved money and prevented waste, values Grandma held sacred after surviving times when food was never guaranteed. The revived bread made perfect toast or bread pudding. Number 21, vinegar pepper sauce. Every kitchen table in the Black South had a bottle of vinegar with hot peppers floating inside. It was not a condiment, it was a preservation system disguised as a table sauce. The peppers released capsaicin into the vinegar over time, creating a solution with both antimicrobial and antioxidant properties. You shook it over greens, beans, rice, or anything that needed brightening. When the vinegar ran low, you poured more in. The same peppers lasted for months, sometimes years. Some families passed the same bottle down through an entire growing season, refilling it the way you top off a gas tank. Food safety officials warned against storing peppers in vinegar at room temperature because the pH might not be low enough to prevent botulism. But vinegar sits at a pH between 2.4 and 3.4, well below the 4.6 threshold where Clostridium botulinum can grow. The science was on your grandmother's side the entire time. She just never got the credit. Cooking over low heat was dismissed as inefficient waste of time by those who valued speed over quality, yet African American cooks knew patience transformed tough cuts into tender luxury. Scientists now confirm that collagen in connective tissue requires extended exposure to low temperatures to convert into gelatin, creating silky texture that quick cooking cannot produce. Research shows that slow braising breaks down muscle fibers gently while retaining moisture that high heat would drive out. Grandmothers set their pots on wood stoves and let oxtails and neck bones simmer for hours until meat fell from bones into rich gravy. What seemed like old-fashioned cooking was precise technique that expensive restaurants now charge premium prices to replicate. Low and slow was about knowing what good food requires. Number 21, comfrey. In old Southern home medicine, this broad-leafed plant was a fixture, brewed into a bitter tea for coughs and stomach trouble, and laid as a poultice on sprains and broken skin. Country healers and grandmothers kept it growing by the back door, and its leaves sometimes found their way into the greens pot the way any wild green might. People trusted it because their mothers had trusted it. But comfrey carries pyrrolizidine alkaloids, compounds that quietly scar the liver and have been tied to cancer in study after study. The damage builds slow with no warning until it is far along. On July 6, 2001, the FDA acted to pull comfrey from every dietary supplement sold in the country, ending its long run as a kitchen cure. A remedy that had been handed down as wisdom for generations turned out to be poisoning the very organ it was meant to heal. Number 14, field peas with snaps. A cook in Lafayette in 1948 stood at the screen door shelling fresh purple hull peas into a wooden bowl, leaving half the pods whole, the snaps. Both went into a deep pot with a smoked ham hock and water to cover. The peas carry 16 grams of protein per cooked cup, plus folate, fiber, and iron. The 1992 USDA food pyramid placed beans low on the chart and pushed bread and cereal to the top. By 2011, the pyramid was retired and replaced because the science underneath it had quietly collapsed. The peas hadn't changed. The chart had been wrong about your grandmother's pot the entire time. Her pot still simmers in her granddaughter's kitchen. The next chart, when it comes, will be wrong about something else. Her pot will still be right. You never boiled them for pie. That rule was absolute and didn't need explaining. Boiling sweet potatoes for custard filling pulls water into the flesh. The potato becomes waterlogged, and no amount of oven time drives all that moisture back out. What you get is a filling that runs, a crust that absorbs liquid from below, a texture closer to puree than set custard. But roasted whole in a dry oven, pierced with a fork and left at high heat, the natural sugars caramelize inside the skin as water evaporates, the flesh concentrates, and the flavor shifts from plain sweet to something honeyed and slightly smoky at the edges. African American cooks across the Southeast held this distinction for generations, roasted for pies, boiled for savory dishes, choosing the jewel or garnet varieties for their dense orange flesh and high sugar content. You knew they were ready when the skin had tightened and split, and a slow dark drip of caramelized syrup had pooled on the pan below. If the sweet potato demanded patience, smell hit you before you saw the table. Sweet, sharp, slightly chemical, like summer fruit soaking in something your mother told you not to touch. Bathtub gin watermelon was the open secret of every rent party and backyard gathering in the 1920s. You cut a plug from a whole watermelon, poured in homemade gin until the fruit absorbed it, replaced the plug, and let it sit overnight. The gin seeped into the flesh, turning each bite cool and burning at the same time. You learned by watching your uncle work the knife on a Saturday afternoon while the yard filled with people who all knew the melon was not just melon. The gin was rough, juniper oil, and grain alcohol, but the fruit softened it, made it sweet enough to forget you were breaking. Two laws at once, possession and distribution. That was what they called sharing a slice with your neighbor. Using coffee grounds to deodorize refrigerators was standard practice in African American households decades before commercial deodorizers existed. Grandmothers would place bowls of spent grounds on refrigerator shelves where they absorbed odors from onions, fish, and leftovers with remarkable effectiveness. Scientists have since confirmed that coffee's porous structure and nitrogen content make it exceptionally effective at trapping volatile odor compounds. The grounds work better than baking soda for many strong smells. This hack recycled kitchen waste into a cleaning solution, exemplifying the waste nothing philosophy of resourceful households. Women who couldn't afford commercial products created their own solutions, proving that ingenuity could replace spending. Storing brown sugar with a slice of bread was common practice in African American pantries, where keeping ingredients fresh meant stretching limited budgets further. Grandmothers tucked plain white bread into the brown sugar container, replacing it every few weeks. The bread slowly released moisture into sugar, preventing hard clumps that made brown sugar unusable. When sugar did harden, the bread trick softened it again within a day or two. Food scientists now explain that brown sugar contains molasses, which absorbs and releases moisture from its environment. The bread acts as a humidity regulator, maintaining the moisture level brown sugar needs to stay soft. This simple hack saved money by preventing waste and eliminating store trips for replacement sugar.
Ash-roasted sweet potatoes were one of the simplest yet most beloved tricks, cooked directly in the coals of an outdoor fire. Families placed whole sweet potatoes under hot ash, letting them roast slowly until their skins blackened and their insides caramelized. The result was tender, smoky, and sweet, needing no sugar or butter to taste indulgent. Children pulled them from the ashes with excitement, blowing off the dust to reveal steaming orange flesh. For many, they were both snack and supper, eaten hot in the yard after long days of work. The trick required no pots, pans, or seasoning, just fire and patience. Ash-roasted sweet potatoes symbolized how resourcefulness could turn the simplest crop into comfort. They were food of the land, as pure as it came, connecting families to earth and fire. Today, they are almost forgotten, replaced by oven-baked versions. Yet the memory of pulling sweetness from ashes lingers as a testament to survival and tradition, wrapped in smoky warmth.
Number 20, reaching for white stone ground meal. The choice was made long before the bowl ever came down off the shelf. Southern cooks did not grab the bright yellow, fine-as-dust meal sold in paper sacks today. They wanted white cornmeal, ground slow between stones, with the grit and the germs still in it. That coarse texture is what gave their cornbread its backbone, a little tooth in every bite instead of a soft cake crumb. The stone grinding kept the corn oil in the meal, so the bread tasted nutty and full even when there was nothing else on the plate. Yellow meal was fine for the hogs, the old saying went, but the table got white. Fresh ground meal also went rancid faster, which is why a good cook bought it in small amounts and used it quick. The lesson they carried was simple. The bread is only as good as the meal you start with, and the meal had to be real corn, not powder. Choose stone ground meal, and you're halfway to honest cornbread. Number 19, the cornmeal dredge, done twice with a 5-minute rest between coats. A Tuesday supper in 1961 Atlanta, the kitchen window opened to a thunderstorm rolling off Stone Mountain. Big Mama had 3 plates set out on the counter. The first held buttermilk, thick and tangy, a splash of hot sauce stirred in. The second held seasoned flour, salt, pepper, garlic powder, and a heavy pinch of paprika. The third held white cornmeal mixed with the same seasonings. She dipped each piece of catfish into the buttermilk, then rolled it through the flour, then back into the buttermilk a second time, then into the cornmeal. She set every dredged fillet on a wire rack over a plate and walked away for exactly 5 minutes. The first coat hydrated, the second coat dried into the first. By the time the lard hit 365 degrees in the iron skillet, the crust was already half locked on. She fried each fillet 2 minutes aside. The crust came out shattering crisp, golden as a Carolina sunset, sealed so tight that not a drop of oil reached the white flesh underneath. She learned the trick from a fish fry on the Pearl River when she was 11 years old. The man running the fryer was an oyster man from Biloxi who'd been frying mullet for 40 years. He told her the rest is the recipe. The buttermilk and the meal are just paint. The rest is what holds the picture together. The part few people talk about is that Big Mama passed it on to her 3 daughters and 7 granddaughters, one by one, every Friday night. One of them is still doing it in a kitchen in Charlotte, and her grandchildren can't eat fast food fish without saying it tastes like soggy cardboard. The trick is older than the supermarket. It's older than the deep fryer. It's as old as a black grandmother who refused to serve her family anything less than glass. Number 20, stretching tough cuts of meat with buttermilk overnight. When the round steak was the cheap kind, the kind that could turn into shoe leather under the wrong hand, Big Mama reached for the buttermilk crock. She would lay the meat flat in a deep bowl, pour cold buttermilk over the top until the steak was fully covered, and slide the bowl into the icebox before she went to bed. The next morning, the same cut that would have fought a fork the night before was relaxed and pliable, ready to be breaded and pan-fried into chicken fried steak that you could cut with the edge of a butter knife. The trick is lactic acid. The mild acid in cultured buttermilk slowly breaks down tough muscle fibers without ever turning the surface mushy the way stronger acids will. Vinegar moves too fast, wine moves too sharp. Buttermilk moves the speed of grandmother time, slow and patient and gentle, which was exactly the right speed for cheap meat and a house full of mouths to feed by morning. Nothing else worked as well, and she always had a quart of buttermilk on hand for biscuits anyway. Soaking greens in salt water was non-negotiable, a step black grandmothers never skipped, regardless of time constraints. Collards, mustards, and turnip greens came from gardens carrying dirt, sand, and sometimes unwanted guests hiding in their leaves. Grandma filled her sink with cold water, added a generous handful of salt, and submerged those greens for at least 30 minutes. The salt drew out grit and convinced stubborn insects to abandon their hiding places. She lifted the greens out, drained the water, then repeated until it ran perfectly clear. This patience showed respect for the food and the people eating it. Serving gritty greens was a kitchen sin no self-respecting grandmother would commit, and this simple saltwater bath ensured clean, tender leaves every time. Adding vinegar to pot liquor was grandma's secret for greens that tasted brighter and more complex than anyone else's recipe. After collards or turnips simmered for hours with smoked meat, she added a splash of apple cider or white vinegar in the final minutes. This small addition cut through the richness of pork fat, balanced the mineral depth of the greens, and added subtle tang, making every bite more interesting. The vinegar also broke down tough fibers, ensuring greens were silky tender. That pot liquor, the precious broth left behind, became a tonic. Grandma insisted was good for colds and broken hearts alike. Families sopped it up with cornbread, drinking in vitamins and comfort. This simple trick elevated humble greens into something tasting like love. Number 25, salt box pork curing. Before refrigeration reached black homes in the rural South, salt was the only thing standing between your family and hunger. A hog was slaughtered in November when the air turned cold. Every cut was rubbed thick with coarse salt and stacked in a wooden box, layer after layer, like bricks in a wall, with salt packed between each piece. The meat sat for weeks, drawing moisture out through osmosis until bacteria could not survive on its surface. That box was the family's bank account in meat. The USDA later said this method was unreliable because home cooks could not measure salinity precisely enough. But food scientists at Texas A&M have confirmed that salt concentrations above 6% create conditions where salmonella and E. coli cannot reproduce. Your great-grandmother did not own a salinity meter. She used her hands and her mother's memory. The pork lasted through March. That was enough. Using molasses instead of white sugar was considered old-fashioned and unsophisticated, a mark of poverty rather than deliberate choice. Scientists now recognize that blackstrap molasses contains significant iron, calcium, magnesium, and potassium that refine white sugar strips away during processing. Research confirms that molasses provides antioxidants supporting bone health, blood sugar regulation, and cardiovascular function. African American cooks stirred it into coffee, drizzled it over biscuits, and baked it into gingerbread that satisfied sweet cravings while delivering actual nutrition. Grandmothers kept sticky jars in pantries, using molasses when money was tight, unknowingly choosing the healthier option. What was dismissed as poverty cooking turns out to be nutritional wisdom modern health advocates now recommend. Number 24, sassafras root. This was the root that gave old homemade root beer its deep, woody bite, and it brewed the sassafras tea that simmered on stoves across the rural South every spring. Folks dug it from the woods, boiled the bark, and drank it as a tonic to thin the blood after a long winter. The smell of it filled kitchens from Appalachia down to the Gulf. Then researchers isolated saffron, the oil that gave sassafras its flavor, and fed it to lab animals. It caused liver cancer in the rats, and the agency moved fast. In 1960, the FDA banned saffron as a food additive, which pulled real sassafras out of root beer and bottled drinks for good. The tea hung on in country kitchens a while longer, traded hand to hand, but the commercial route was finished. A flavor that once meant springtime and homemade soda was struck from the food supply by federal order. Number 23, hog jowl with greens. The cured cheek of the pig went into a heavy iron pot at first light, covered with water, and did not come off the stove until afternoon. A cook in rural Virginia layered collard leaves on top, stem side down, and watched the fat slowly melt through the green. The pot smoked low for hours. The kitchen smelled of pork and earth and wood smoke. Edna Lewis, born in Freetown, Virginia, in 1916, wrote about this dish in 1976 the way other people write about prayer. She kept cooking it until she passed in 2006. Her recipe outlived the entire low-fat decade. Doctors warned against jowl meat through every one of those years. What the warnings missed is that the fat was not contaminating the leaf. The fat was the reason your body could pull the iron out of the leaf at all. Your great-grandmother in 1958 knew this without a single chart. She just watched her grandchildren grow. Buttermilk might be a workaround, but the fat was never negotiable. Before the dough was started, the butter, or lard, if that was what the kitchen kept, went to the coldest available place, the windowsill in winter, the back of the icebox, or a glass of cold water if nothing else worked. Cold fat is the entire secret to a flaky biscuit. When cold butter hits a hot oven, it creates pockets of steam as it suddenly releases, and those pockets become layers. Southern black bakers understood this for generations, even when the explanation lived in muscle memory rather than in words. The rule was simple: never let the fat warm up, work fast, and don't overwork the dough, because overworking activates gluten, and tight gluten is the enemy of a tender biscuit. You could feel when the dough was right, and you could feel the second it went wrong that you had held it one touch too long. They will tell you prohibition only banned drinking. They will not tell you it banned cooking. The Volstead Act turned grandmothers into criminals overnight. Peach brandy and cobbler was never about getting drunk. A tablespoon folded into the peaches with brown sugar and cinnamon before the batter went on top. It deepened the fruit, burned off mostly in the oven, and left a warmth that sugar alone could never give. Households hid brandy in medicine bottles, traded with neighbors who had working stills. Federal agents raided black homes at far higher rates than white ones. Historian Lisa McGurr documented the disproportionate enforcement of prohibition on African American communities, so the women baked quieter. When the last of the brandy ran dry, the cobbler still tasted good, but something underneath was gone. A depth, a heat, the ghost of a recipe nobody dared write down. Rubbing butter on minor burns was dismissed by modern medicine before researchers discovered the science behind this African-American remedy. Grandmothers would immediately apply cold butter to small kitchen burns, providing instant cooling relief and creating a protective barrier against infection. While doctors initially criticized this practice, studies have since shown that fat content creates an occlusive layer that locks in moisture and protects damaged skin from bacteria. The cold temperature also provided immediate pain relief by numbing nerve endings at the burn site. This hack was passed from mother to daughter in kitchens where cast iron skillets and wood stoves made burns a common occurrence. Women kept dedicated butter dishes near stoves specifically for this purpose. Cooking rice with a clean dish towel under the lid was a technique African American cooks used to achieve perfectly fluffy grains every single time. After bringing rice to a boil and reducing to simmer, grandmothers draped a thin cotton towel over the pot before replacing the lid. The towel absorbed excess moisture that would otherwise drip back onto rice, creating soggy, clumpy results. This simple barrier allowed steam to work while wicking away condensation that ruined texture. Food scientists studying rice preparation now recommend this exact method, explaining that the towel prevents water from pooling while maintaining humid environment needed for even cooking. What seemed like grandmother's quirky habit was actually precise moisture control that professional chefs now teach.
Hog crackling gravy was a trick to bring bold flavor to otherwise plain meals of rice, potatoes, or cornbread. Cracklings, the crispy bits left from rendering pork fat, were stirred into pan drippings and flour to make a rich, textured gravy. The salty crunch of the cracklings turned a simple starch into something hearty and satisfying. Families loved it because it stretched scraps into abundance, proving that nothing from the hog was wasted. It was often poured over large bowls of rice, transforming the cheapest ingredient into a meal fit for a feast. Children scooped it eagerly, not realizing they were eating thrift disguised as indulgence. The gravy carried the smoky, savory essence of pork, a taste that defined many kitchens of the South. Today, hog crackling gravy is nearly forgotten, replaced by smoother gravies with no trace of grit. Yet in its time, it embodied the art of survival cooking, where resourcefulness brought joy to the table. Hog crackling gravy was poverty made flavorful.
Number 13, never adding sugar. This was the rule they never broke, and it was almost a point of pride. Real Southern cornbread had no sugar in it. Not a spoonful, not a pinch. To these cooks, sugar turned bread into cake, and cake had no business sitting next to a pot of greens or a bowl of beans. Cornbread was meant to be a savory thing, a vessel for soaking up pot liquor and gravy, and sweetness only got in the way of that job. The corn itself carried all the gentle sweetness the bread ever needed, especially good stone ground meal that still had its oil. Sweet cornbread was sometimes called Yankee cornbread, said with a small frown, because the sugar marked it as somebody else's recipe from somewhere up north. There was also plain sense in the rule. Sugar was expensive and was saved for the cobblers and the cakes that earned the splurge on a special day. Wasting it on the everyday bread that came to the table 3 times a week made no sense in a careful kitchen. So the bread stayed honest, browning deep and tasting of corn and fat and a little salt exactly the way it was meant to taste beside greens and beans. A cook who slipped in sugar gave herself away. Leave the sugar in the bowl where it belongs. Number 25, rinsing rice in cold water 3 times before it ever touches the pot. A blue speckled bowl on a porcelain sink in 1949 Charleston. Your big mama poured the long grain in, swirled it twice with her fingers, and tipped the cloudy water down the drain. She did it again, and then a third time until the water ran clear as a creek in March. What most people miss is that supermarket rice came dusted with talc and broken starch, the kind that'd turn a pot of clean white rice into glue by supper time. Edna Lewis wrote about this same trick in her notebooks from Freetown. The rice, once rinsed, sat in a cast iron pot with a pinch of salt and a tablespoon of bacon fat, simmered 18 minutes, and lifted off the spoon in single grains that held their shape under a ladle of pot lacquer. Modern cooks call it gourmet technique. Your big mama called it Wednesday. Number 24, measuring salt in the cup of the palm. There were no spoons in her hand when the salt box came down off the shelf. Big mama poured the salt into the soft hollow of her left palm, the one nearest the thumb, and gave it a half shake to settle the grains. A flat puddle was for greens. A small mound was for the bean pot. A heap that crowned over the edge of her hand was for a fresh batch of cornbread batter. She had learned the measure standing next to her own grandmother as a child, and her hand knew the right weight the way a piano player's fingers know a chord. Food scientists today have measured the average cooking palm at right around 3/4 of a teaspoon. Big Mama had figured that out without ever opening a book. She's salted by feel because feel never lied to her, and the cardboard box of Morton sat right there on the counter where her hand could find it in the dark. Using coffee and gravy for depth separated ordinary cooks from grandmothers who understood flavor-building mysteries. After frying chicken or pork chops, Grandma deglazed her cast iron with leftover coffee from the morning pot, scraping up precious browned bits stuck to the bottom. The coffee added bitter, complexity-enhancing savory meat flavors without anyone identifying the secret ingredient. Mixed with flour and milk or broth, this became gravy tasting richer and more sophisticated than seemed possible from humble beginnings. Children begged for more, adults asked for the recipe, and Grandma smiled knowingly without revealing her trick. The coffee's roasted notes deepened the color and balanced sweetness, creating gravy worthy of Sunday dinner. Number 18, ash lye hominy. This is the one that regulators tried hardest to stop. Black families in the Deep South soaked dried corn kernels in a solution of water and hardwood ash to make hominy. The lye from the ash dissolved the tough outer hull of the corn and transformed it into something softer, larger, and far more nutritious. The process is called nixtamalization. Nobody in rural Alabama used that word. They called it making lye hominy. Public health officials banned the sale of homemade lye hominy in several states by the 1970s because lye is caustic and improperly prepared batches could cause chemical burns. The caution was not unreasonable, but the technique itself was brilliant. Nixtamalization releases niacin that is otherwise locked inside the corn. Without it, communities that depend on corn develop pellagra, a devastating deficiency disease. Indigenous peoples knew this thousands of years ago. Black families inherited the knowledge and kept it alive. Scientists did not fully explain the biochemistry until the late 20th century. The women who made lye hominy every fall were preventing a disease they had never heard of. When the government said stop, families who listened got sicker. Families who kept their ash hoppers in the backyard did not. Seasoning food without measuring was criticized as imprecise cooking that could never produce consistent results, yet African American grandmothers created dishes so perfectly balanced that chefs could not replicate them. Scientists understand that experienced cooks develop sensory calibration, exceeding measuring cup accuracy, adjusting for variables recipes cannot account for. Research confirms that intuitive cooking engages multiple senses simultaneously, creating flavor decisions mechanical measurement misses. Grandmothers tasted as they cooked, adding pinches and dashes until their hands knew the dish was right. The practice developed over years of daily cooking, building expertise no cookbook could teach. What seemed like careless approximation was sophisticated skill responding to each unique batch of ingredients. Time dépense, reusing. Number 18, brominated vegetable oil. This one hid in plain sight the additive that kept the citrus flavor from floating to the top in orange and lemon lime sodas. Those bright bottles were a fixture at the cookout and the church picnic, lined up in the cooler beside the sweet tea, and brominated vegetable oil was what kept them looking right. Most folks drinking them never knew the name, but bromine builds up in the body over time, and studies done with the National Institutes of Health found it could harm the heart and the thyroid at the levels people actually consumed. The evidence finally tipped the scale. On July 3rd, 2024, the FDA revoked the rule that had allowed brominated vegetable oil in food, ordering it out of the soda supply for good. An ingredient that had ridden along in our drinks for decades, doing its quiet job, was pulled the moment the science caught up with it. Oxtail stew. The bony tail of the cow, simmered 4 hours with carrots, onion, thyme, and a splash of red wine until the meat slipped off the bone in long strings. For most of the 20th century, butchers in Brooklyn gave oxtail away free or charged pennies. Black households turned it into Sunday dinner. The slow simmer pulled collagen out of the bone and into the broth, the same compound the wellness aisle now sells in tubs at the grocery store. By 2015, restaurants in the same Brooklyn neighborhood were charging $38 for a single bowl. The recipe had not changed. Only who could afford it had. The cook who made it in 1962 knew where the value lived. The market took 50 years to agree. The cheaper a cut was, the more your body needed it. The bones, the connective tissue, the slow-cooked tendons, all of it carrying the structural protein your wellness aisle now bottles. She was buying it for free. Number 9, and if the biscuit work took patience, it was nothing compared to what starting a pound cake properly required. 7 minutes. That was the standard in the kitchens where pound cake was taken seriously. Not 3, not 5, but a full 7 minutes of butter and sugar beating together before a single egg went in. By the end of it, the butter would be pale and nearly white. So aerated, it had roughly doubled in volume, and the sound of the beaters would have shifted from a dense thud to something lighter and faster. This was not decoration. The extended creaming process is what gives soul food pound cake its characteristic crumb and lift without extra leavening. The sugar crystals working against the fat over those 7 minutes cut millions of tiny air pockets into the butter, and those pockets carried the cake upward in the oven. The 7-up pound cake tradition, documented in African American households across the South since at least the 1950s, depended on long creaming plus soda carbonation together for its signature height. What you build in the first 7 minutes is what you taste in the last slice. Set up before dawn, oil heating in cast iron, cornmeal in a paper sack, catfish fillets on yesterday's newspaper. By the time the sun hit the porch, there would be a line. Selling fried fish from the front porch was how black women fed neighborhoods and paid rent through the 1920s, where Jim Crow shut them out of wage work. 15 cents bought a plate, fish, coleslaw, cornbread, hot sauce, no license, no sign, just the smell pulling people from 3 blocks away. By mid-decade, cities like Philadelphia required vendors to obtain licenses and submit to inspections, with fines up to $50, a fortune for a woman earning pennies per plate. The rules landed hardest on black women who had built entire economies from their kitchens. Some paid the fee and kept frying. Others moved indoors, sold quieter. The plates got smaller. The lines got shorter. One morning, the porch was just a porch again. Sprinkling salt on carpet stains before vacuuming was a cleaning method African American housekeepers swore by for generations. When red wine, coffee, or grease hit the floor, grandmothers would immediately cover the spot with table salt, letting it absorb the liquid before vacuuming away. Scientists now explain that salt's crystalline structure draws moisture through osmosis, while its mild abrasive properties lift pigments from fibers. The technique worked especially well on fresh stains before they set permanently. This hack cost pennies and required no special equipment beyond what every kitchen contained. Women taught their daughters to act quickly with salt rather than panic over spills. The practice demonstrated how simple chemistry could outperform expensive commercial spot removers. Soaking fish in buttermilk before frying was essential preparation in African American kitchens, especially when dealing with catfish pulled fresh from rivers and ponds. Fish rested in buttermilk anywhere from 30 minutes to overnight, depending on how strong the flavor needed taming. Buttermilk's acidity broke down surface proteins, tenderizing flesh, while its cultures neutralized muddy or fishy taste freshwater fish sometimes carried. The milk proteins also helped cornmeal coating adhere better, creating crispier crust that stayed put during frying. Modern food science confirms acidic marinades denature surface proteins for better texture and breading adhesion. This hack transformed humble catches into celebrated dishes that became centerpieces of fish fries and family gatherings.
Ash cake. Cornbread was a survival trick passed down through generations, made when ovens or pans were not available, yet cornmeal was plentiful. Cooks mixed a simple batter of cornmeal, water, and salt, then wrapped it in cabbage or collard leaves to shield it from the dirt. The bundle was buried directly in hot ashes, where it slowly baked until firm and fragrant. When pulled from the fire and unwrapped, the bread carried a smoky flavor and a rustic crust unlike anything from a modern oven. Families prized this method because it cost nothing and could be done outdoors, whether on plantations, homesteads, or during long field days. For children, unwrapping the leaves felt like opening a hidden gift, revealing warm bread inside. Ash cakes filled bellies with little effort, connecting people directly to the earth and the fire that cooked it. Today, this trick is nearly forgotten, overshadowed by easy oven-baked cornbread. Yet it reminds us that ingenuity often comes from necessity, and a simple pile of ashes could produce a meal of strength and comfort.
Number 19, screaming the skillet hot before the batter goes in. This is the one trick that separated their cornbread from everyone else's, and it started with patience. The greased iron pan went into the oven empty, or sat over the open flame until it was almost smoking. Cooks listened for it, and they watched it, looking for the first thin wisp of smoke off the grease. When a drop of batter hit that surface and hissed like water on a stove lid, the pan was ready, and not 1 second before. Only then did the rest of the batter go in, and the whole bowl would crackle and spit the moment it touched the metal. That violent first contact set the crust instantly before the inside ever began to cook. The bottom seared and sealed itself in the time it took to set the bowl down. The result was an edge so crisp it cracked like glass when you cut it, golden brown all the way around, while the middle stayed tender and steamed soft. A cold pan gave you pale, greasy bread that stuck and stewed in its own moisture instead of searing. The hot pan gave you that lacquered bottom every Sunday plate fought over, the peace children begged for. It took no extra money, only the patience to wait out the heat. Heat the iron until it scares you, then pour. Number 24, knocking the cast iron skillet to test the heat before the lard ever went in. A Kentucky kitchen in 1958. The pan had been her mother's, then her aunt's, then hers. Big Mama would drum the iron rim with the back of her wooden spoon and listen for the change in pitch, a low, ringing tone that said the pan was ready. Cold iron answered dull. Hot iron answered like a bell. Once the bell rang, she dropped a pinch of cornmeal into the dry pan. If the meal danced and browned in 3 seconds, the chicken went in. If it didn't, she waited a beat longer. There wasn't a thermometer, an infrared gun, or an app. There was a woman, an iron pan, and 40 years of knowing. The fried chicken came out crackling. The skin shattered. The meat was juicy enough to drip down the wrist of the child who ate it, standing at the counter. Year after year, that same pan rang the same bell. Number 25, reading the foam on a pot of beans. Big Mama did not set a timer for pintos. She watched the foam. When a pot of dry beans first comes up to a boil, a thick gray crown rises to the top. Younger cooks today skim it off and worry. The older women in the kitchen knew what it meant. That foam is starch and saponin lifting out of the bean skins, and the way it behaves tells you the temperature of the pot. A loose, drifting foam means the beans are simmering right. A tight, packed foam climbing the side of the pot means the heat is too high and the skins will split before the centers turn creamy. Big Mama would lift the lid, look once, and slide the pot half off the burner without saying a word. By the time supper was on the table, every bean was tender to the tooth and not a single one had burst. The foam was the timer. Her eyes were the thermometer. Keeping brown sugar soft with bread was kitchen wisdom that saved countless batches of cookies, cakes, and candied yams from disaster. Black grandmothers knew brown sugar turned into a rock-hard brick if left alone too long, making it impossible to measure. Her solution was elegantly simple. She placed a slice of fresh white bread directly in the sugar container and sealed it tight. Within a day or two, the sugar absorbed moisture from the bread, returning to its soft, scoopable state. The bread became stale, having sacrificed its moisture for the greater good. This trick meant Grandma always had workable brown sugar ready, never having to chip away at a solid mass. It was resourcefulness solving problems with what was already in the kitchen. Number 19, sun-drying fruit on tin roofs. This was summer's most important chore in the Black South, and nobody treated it lightly. In July and August, Black women in Georgia and the Carolinas sliced peaches, apples, and figs and laid them out on clean cloth atop tin roofs that baked in the summer sun. The heat and airflow removed moisture until the fruit turned leathery, like soft candy, and could be stored in cotton sacks through the coldest months. The process took 2 or 3 days, depending on the thickness of the slices. Women checked the fruit every few hours, turning the pieces to dry evenly and chasing off insects. Children were assigned to watch the trays and shoo away birds. It was a family operation with real consequences. If you did not dry enough fruit in July, your family had no fruit in January. That was not an inconvenience. That was a gap in the diet that nothing else could fill. The USDA advised against sun drying because it could not guarantee consistent temperatures or protection from contamination. They recommended electric dehydrators that cost more than some families earned in a month. but the tin roofs reached temperatures above 140 degrees on a July afternoon. That is the exact threshold the USDA now recommends for safe dehydration. The women were hitting the target without ever reading the manual. The tin roof was doing the same work as a $200 appliance, using nothing but sunlight. A church woman in Savannah dried enough peaches every summer to fill her pantry through Christmas. She gave bags of dried fruit as gifts the way other people gave cards. Neighbors came by in October asking if she had any peaches left. She always did. She had been doing it since the 1930s. Her peaches never made anyone sick, not once in 50 years. That tin roof was her dehydrator. The sun was free. The knowledge was what cost something. Using every part of vegetables was seen as desperate poverty, cooking by those who discarded carrot tops, beet greens, and turnip leaves without a second thought. African American cooks knew those parts contained nutrition that grocery stores trained people to throw away. Scientists now confirm that vegetable tops often contain higher concentrations of vitamins and minerals than the roots they grow from. Beet greens provide more iron than the beets themselves. Carrot tops offer compounds that support liver function. Turnip greens deliver calcium, rivaling dairy products. Grandmothers washed and cooked these tops alongside their vegetables, stretching resources while maximizing nutrition. What seemed like making do with scraps was actually whole food eating that modern nutritionists now champion as optimal. Number 23, sea turtle meat. Along the Gullah Geechee coast of the Carolinas and Georgia, turtle was once a Sunday food, stewed slow with onions, sherry, and dark roux into a soup that fed whole families. Green sea turtle was the prize, rich and almost beefy, and the recipes for it passed down through low country kitchens for generations. Coastal black communities had cooked it since slavery, turning a creature that washed up in the marsh into something worth gathering around. But the great sea turtles were vanishing, hunted toward the edge of extinction up and down both coasts. So Congress acted. The Endangered Species Act of 1973 made it illegal to take, sell, or serve any of the 6 sea turtle species in American waters, and turtle soup left the menu. Restaurants that had served it for 100 years quietly dropped it. A dish older than the recipes that named it was ended not by taste but by law. Number 15, cabbage stewed with neck bones. A butcher in Memphis in 1962 sold neck bones for 19 cents a pound, and most cooks bought them by the bag. A cook carried the bag home in brown paper, tipped it into a deep pot with green cabbage, an onion cut in half, and a spoonful of black pepper. The pot simmered 4 hours. The meat slid off the bone. The collagen melted into the broth and turned to a soft gel as the pot cooled overnight. The same compound that home cooks were pulling out of bones in 1962 is what every collagen powder company now sells in a tub for $40. The pot did the work. The lab took the credit later. She didn't build the children she fed. She just put another ladle on the plate and watched them clean it. Her broth was already what every wellness aisle is now trying to sell back to you. She didn't know to charge for it. White sugar does one thing. Brown sugar does 3. It sweetens, yes, but it also holds moisture. The molasses in brown sugar is hygroscopic, pulling water from the air and keeping baked goods softer longer. And it brings depth that refined white sugar cannot deliver. Something slightly caramel, the taste of the cane before all the complexity was processed away. African American bakers use brown sugar in sweet potato pies and cornbread and layer cakes long before the rest of American baking caught up. During the Depression and war years, when white sugar was rationed and tight, brown sugar was both cheaper and more available, and the baked goods from those kitchens were richer for it. Light brown sugar gives warmth. Dark brown gives depth close to molasses. The women who knew which to reach for never needed to explain why. Long before the smokehouse went quiet, there was a sound on the streets of New Orleans that meant breakfast, a woman's voice in French Creole calling out over a basket balanced on her head, hot rice fritters rising from a cold brazier. Callous were the original banned soul food. Deep-fried rice cakes made from leftover rice, flour, eggs, sugar, and nutmeg, sold by black women in the French Quarter since the 1700s, when the Code Noir gave enslaved women Sundays off to sell food and earn their own money. By the 1920s, vending ordinances pushed the women off the streets. The city wanted cleaner sidewalks. What it erased was a tradition connecting back to West African rice culture, the Wolof and Mandinka peoples who cultivated the grain that built Louisiana's economy. Rose Nicole, the most famous calla seller, purchased her freedom with fritter money earned outside Sunday Mass. By the 1930s, the calla women were gone. The sound went with them. Placing a wooden spoon across boiling pots to prevent overflow was a technique every African-American grandmother seemed to know instinctively. When pasta water or milk threatened to bubble over, laying a wooden spoon across the pot's rim would mysteriously calm the foam. Food scientists have since explained that wood's dry surface destabilizes bubbles on contact, while the spoon's temperature causes rapid bubble collapse. This hack saved countless stovetops from sticky messes and allowed multitasking cooks to attend other duties without constant watching. Grandmothers would position their spoons and turn to other tasks, confident their pots would behave. Children watched this seeming magic and learned that traditional knowledge often outpaced scientific understanding. Wrapping cake layers in cloth while still warm was a technique African-American bakers used to achieve moist, tender cakes that stayed fresh for days. As soon as layers came from the oven, grandmothers turned them onto clean cotton towels, wrapping gently while still steaming. The cloth trapped moisture that would otherwise escape, keeping cakes soft instead of letting it dry out as it cooled. This method also prevented the crusty exterior that forms when cakes cool uncovered. Modern baking science confirms that steam retention during cooling keeps crumb structure tender and prevents moisture loss, leading to stale texture. Professional bakers now use plastic wrap for similar effect, but cotton cloth worked just as well. This hack ensured even simple cakes tasted rich and fresh at church gatherings.
Slab bacon. Grease cookies were a sweet born out of thrift, when butter was scarce and nothing could be wasted. Families saved every drop of bacon grease in jars, using it not only for frying, but also for baking. When mixed into cookie dough with sugar, flour, and spices, the grease gave the cookies a unique smoky richness. They were soft, slightly salty, and filled with the taste of survival, proof that ingenuity could transform scraps into something special. Children often ate them warm from the oven, unaware they were built on frugality rather than luxury. These cookies carried the story of resilience, turning what others might discard into dessert. They were common in households where bacon was a rare indulgence, stretching its value far beyond breakfast. The smell of these cookies baking lingered in kitchens, a blend of sweet and savory unlike anything from store-bought treats. Today, they are nearly vanished, their memory tied to hard times. Slab bacon grease cookies show how even hardship can leave behind flavors worth remembering.
Number 17, the cast iron skillet itself. No tool in the southern kitchen carried more weight, and not just the literal kind. For most families, through most of these years, The heavy black pan was not one choice among many. It was the only pan there was. Everything came out of it: the cornbread and the fried chicken, the beans, the gravy, the eggs at dawn. It was bought once and meant to last a lifetime, and it usually outlasted the cook. A good skillet was never scrubbed down to bare metal. The thin layer of cooked-in fat, the seasoning, was guarded like money because it was money in a way. That black sheen meant the bread released clean and the crust browned even, with no flour and no fuss. When a pan was passed from a mother to a daughter, it came already seasoned by years of cornbread and pork fat, carrying the memory of every meal cooked before. That was the real inheritance, more than any china. The deeper history sits in the iron too. Many of these pans came up through plantation kitchens, where enslaved black women fed everyone and cooked over open hearths with whatever they were given, turning the cheapest meal into something that tasted like care. The skill of reading a hot pan by sound and smell, of knowing the exact moment to pour, was learned hard and handed down on purpose, one of the few things that could be kept and passed along when so much else was taken. So the skillet was never just a skillet, it was a record of who taught whom, a tool that held heat and held history at the same time. A grandmother's pan was her signature, and the cornbread it made was proof the lesson had been received. Treat the iron with respect and it will outlast you too. Number 20, dropping a clean copper penny into the greens pot to keep the color bright. A Sunday afternoon in Macon, Georgia, 1948. The collards had been picked from the garden that morning, the stems stripped, the leaves stacked and rolled and sliced into ribbons. Big Mama dropped them into the pot with a smoked turkey neck, a splash of cider vinegar, and a single Lincoln penny scrubbed bright with a slice of lemon. The greens cooked 2.5 hours. The copper held the green pigment in the leaves, so the pot came out emerald instead of army drab. She fished the penny out with a slotted spoon before serving and dropped it back into the cleaning jar by the sink. Modern cookbooks tell you to skip this trick because they're worried about leaching. Your Big Mama would tell you a clean penny and a clean pot for 2 hours never killed a soul, and the greens still tasted like Sunday. Number 23, testing hot oil with the wooden spoon handle. Before a single piece of chicken hit the grease, Big Mama lowered the dry end of a wooden spoon straight down into the pot. If the wood sat there quiet, the oil was cold and the chicken would sit in it like a sponge. If a slow string of pearl bubbles climbed the handle, the oil was right around 350 degrees, the temperature every fried chicken recipe in the world will tell you to chase. If the bubbles came up fast and angry, she slid the pot off the eye and waited. No clip-on thermometer ever lived in her kitchen. The wood told the truth every time because moisture trapped in the grain reacted to the heat of the oil with predictable bubbling, and once you had seen it, you never forgot what right looked like. Her chicken came out the color of polished walnut, and the crust never went soggy on the plate. Tenderizing tough meat with cola was a Depression-era trick Black grandmothers swore by when working with cheap, stubborn cuts that threatened to stay chewy. Grandma poured a bottle of cola over brisket, roast, or pork shoulder, letting it marinate overnight before slow cooking the next day. The phosphoric acid broke down tough muscle fibers while sugars caramelized during cooking, creating a glaze both sweet and savory. This technique turned budget cuts into meals tasting expensive, proving ingenuity could overcome limited grocery money. Families who couldn't afford prime beef still ate tender, flavorful meat because grandma understood cooking chemistry without formal education. The cola trick became legendary in Black kitchens, whispered between neighbors, and shared at church gatherings. Number 23, lard sealing. After rendering hog fat over a low fire until it turned white and clean, your grandmother poured that liquid lard over cooked meats in a crock until the fat covered every surface by at least an inch. When the lard cooled and solidified, it created an airtight seal like a wax lid that no bacteria could penetrate. The meat stayed preserved for months in a root cellar without any refrigeration at all. Families in the Delta kept crocks of lard-sealed pork in their cellars all winter. Health officials in the 1950s called this method dangerous and unsanitary. Modern food science tells a different story. Rendered lard, stored in a cool environment, creates an anaerobic barrier that prevents oxidation and microbial growth. French chefs call this technique confit and charge you $40 a plate. Black women in Mississippi called it putting up meat and charged nothing. Today's gourmet is yesterday's survival. Adding sugar to savory dishes was mocked as unsophisticated palate that could not appreciate real flavor. Yet, African American cooks knew a pinch of sweetness transformed their greens and tomato sauces into something extraordinary. Scientists now understand that sugar enhances perception of other flavors, reduces bitterness, and triggers pleasure centers that make food memorable. Research confirms that small amounts in savory dishes improve overall flavor balance without making food taste sweet. Grandmothers stirred a spoonful into collard greens, added it to cornbread batter, and balanced acidic tomato dishes with sweetness. The technique was subtle enough that guests never identified sugar as the secret ingredient. What seemed like strange kitchen habit was sophisticated flavor chemistry that top chefs now employ deliberately. Number 22, saccharine. By the 1970s, it had become the standby in countless black kitchens. The little tablets dropped into coffee and the powder stirred into pitchers of tea for anyone told to ease off the sugar. It was older than cyclamate and had outlasted it, the survivor of the artificial sweeteners. Then, in March of 1977, the FDA announced it intended to ban saccharin too, citing Canadian studies that found bladder cancer in male rats fed heavy doses. The outcry was immediate. Congress stepped in and saved the sweetener, but it did not let it off clean. Lawmakers signed the Saccharin Study and Labeling Act in November of 1977, forcing every package and product to carry a stark warning that it had caused cancer in lab animals. So the powder stayed on the table, but now it spoke a warning every time you reached for it. The sweetness our elders trusted came wrapped in a federal caution that followed it for decades. Number 21, bacon grease biscuits. A small tin sat on the back shelf above every southern stove, half full of cold-saved bacon fat from breakfast. A cook in Mobile would scoop a teaspoon out with a butter knife, cut it into self-rising flour with a fork, and roll the dough out on the counter dusted with cornmeal. The biscuits went into a hot oven at 425 and came out 15 minutes later with tops cracked open. The fat carried vitamin A and vitamin D and vitamin K straight into a bite of bread. The 1990s fat-free era pushed margarine onto every supermarket shelf instead. By 2015, the FDA pulled those same hydrogenated oils off the shelves because the trans fats were killing people. The bacon grease tin, meanwhile, sat undisturbed on the same shelf for 40 years. Her biscuits kept rising. The food authorities, who told her to throw the tin out, had to come back and admit the replacement was worse than the thing they replaced. No buttermilk meant a 10-second fix. You took whatever milk was left, poured a cup, added a tablespoon of white vinegar or lemon juice, stirred it twice, and let it sit for 5 minutes. What came back was close enough in chemistry to do the job. The acid had begun curdling the milk protein slightly, creating the tangy consistency that activates baking soda the way true buttermilk does. The acid-base reaction between buttermilk and baking soda is what produces the rise in quick breads. Carbon dioxide bubbles from chemistry, not just heat. African American bakers in the rural South, especially during the 1940s and 50s, when fresh buttermilk wasn't always available, knew this substitution by instinct. They didn't need a food chemistry textbook. They needed biscuits on the table by 6 in the morning, and the vinegar trick made that possible with whatever was left in the house. In 1907, Alabama appointed its first game commissioner, and his opening argument was that black men who hunted did not work hard enough on tenant farms. That was the real reason behind the hunting laws, not conservation, but control. Possum roast suppers had been tradition in black households since before emancipation, rooted in West African practices of using every protein the land offered. The possum was soaked overnight in salted water, then slow roasted with sweet potatoes until the fat rendered down and the meat fell apart. People gathered on autumn nights, the smell drifting across cotton fields. But the new laws required licenses that cost money sharecroppers did not have, and wardens arrested black men caught hunting after dark. The suppers grew quieter, the hunts moved deeper into woods where no warden walked, and as folks migrated north to cities with no possums, no pits, no autumn nights smelling like roasting fat, the tradition slipped away, not because anyone chose to leave it, but because the law made keeping it too costly. Using vinegar rinses to make hair shine was an African American beauty secret that hairdressers now scientifically support and recommend. Grandmothers would mix apple cider vinegar with water for final rinses after washing, producing remarkable shine and manageability that lasted for days. Scientists have confirmed that vinegar's acidity closes the hair cuticle, smoothing scales that cause dullness while removing soap residue. This technique was especially valuable for natural hair textures, enhancing curl definition and reducing tangles without expensive products. Women would share their exact ratios at beauty parlors, perfecting formulas through generations of careful experimentation. The practice cost pennies compared to commercial products. Adding a splash of coffee to chocolate desserts was a secret weapon in African American baking that confused anyone who tasted the results but could not identify the mystery ingredient. Grandmothers stirred small amounts of strong black coffee into chocolate cake batters, brownie mixes, and puddings without the final product tasting like coffee at all. The caffeine and compounds in coffee amplified chocolate flavor, making it taste richer without adding more cocoa. This technique allowed families to stretch expensive chocolate further while achieving deeper results. Food scientists now understand that coffee contains compounds that enhance chocolate perception by activating the same taste receptors. Professional pastry chefs regularly use this trick today.
Chitterling fritters were another way African American kitchens stretched every part of the hog, ensuring nothing went to waste. Chitlins, or pig intestines, were cleaned, boiled, and then chopped finely before being mixed with flour, eggs, and seasonings. The mixture was formed into patties and fried in hot fat until golden. The result was crispy on the outside, tender inside, and packed with flavor. Families prized fritters because they could feed many mouths with very little meat, transforming scraps into something satisfying. For children, the fritters felt like a snack, even if they came from humble origins. The smell of frying chitlins was strong, but the taste was treasured by those who grew up with it. Chitterling fritters were not just food, but part of a tradition that honored the skill of turning the least into the most. Today, they are rarely made, their labor-intensive preparation out of step with fast meals. Yet they remain a reminder of resilience and ingenuity, showing how survival could be fried into something unforgettable.
Number 18, mixing the batter with buttermilk, never sweet milk. Plain milk made a flat, dull bread, and these cooks knew it. They reached for buttermilk, thick and sour, left over from churning or simply turned on the back of the counter. That tang did two jobs at once. It seasoned the bread with a faint sharpness that played against the sweet corn, and its acid woke up the leavening so the crumb rose light instead of dense. The sourness also tenderized the meal, softening the grit and leaving the crumb fine. Buttermilk kept the inside moist as well, which mattered when the bread had to stretch across a long table and still taste good cold the next morning. In poorer kitchens, when the cow's milk had gone past fresh and turned thick, that was no waste at all. Soured milk was exactly what the recipe wanted, and the more it had clabbered, the better the bread. Nothing on a southern farm got thrown out if it could feed somebody first, and a turned jug of milk was simply tomorrow's cornbread waiting. A cook who understood buttermilk understood that sour was not spoiled, it was flavor and lift waiting to be used. Sweet milk made a pale, lazy loaf by comparison. Pour in the buttermilk and the bread will thank you. Number 21, salting the meat the night before you cook. It, a Birmingham kitchen in 1955. Big Mama unwrapped a pork shoulder from the butcher paper and rubbed kosher salt deep into the fat cap with both hands. She covered it loose with a dish towel and slid it onto the cool side of the icebox. By morning, the salt had drawn the moisture to the surface, then pulled it back in along with every grain of seasoning. The meat cooked tender enough to fall off the bone with the back of a fork. Restaurant chefs would later call this a dry brine and write whole books about it. Big Mama called it leaving the meat alone overnight. She had learned the same trick from her own grandmother, who had learned it on a tobacco farm in 1898. The salt did the same work in every kitchen. The patience was the seasoning. Number 17, saving the pot liquor for the next day's soup. The dark broth left in the bottom of the greens pot was never thrown out in Big Mama's kitchen. It was the foundation of tomorrow's supper. She would ladle the pot liquor into a clean glass jar, screw the lid down tight, and set it on the cold shelf of the icebox. The next afternoon, that same jar became the cooking liquid for a pot of rice, or the simmering base for a quick pan of dumplings, or the soup itself if the cornbread held out. The liquid carried every bit of flavor that had cooked out of the greens and the smoked meat, along with most of the water-soluble vitamins, which is why pot liquor was prescribed by Southern doctors during the Depression for anemic children. Big Mama saved it because the alternative was pouring grocery money down the drain, and she had never poured grocery money anywhere but into the pot. 1 pound of greens fed the family twice, and the second meal was usually the better one because the flavor had a night to settle and deepen. Testing oil temperature with cornmeal was how Black grandmothers knew their skillets were ready without thermometers or gadgets. A pinch of cornmeal dropped into hot oil told the whole story. If it sank and sat lifeless, the oil needed more time. If it sizzled immediately, dancing across the surface and turning golden within seconds, the temperature was perfect for frying. Grandma read that sizzle like a language, knowing exactly when to add battered chicken or catfish. This technique prevented soggy, grease-soaked food from oil that wasn't hot enough and saved dinner from burning when oil got too aggressive. The cornmeal test required no batteries, just wisdom passed from mother to daughter across generations, and it worked every single time. Number 22, smoke curing with green hickory. In the smokehouse behind nearly every Black homestead in the rural South, hams and shoulders hung from rafters above a smoldering pit of green hickory wood. The smoke was not just for flavor, it was chemistry in the air, invisible and exact. The phenols in wood smoke acted as antioxidants that slowed fat breakdown. The formaldehyde and acetic acid lowered the pH on the surface of the meat, creating an antimicrobial barrier that worked around the clock. A properly smoked ham lasted an entire year hanging in that smokehouse. The USDA declared backyard smokehouses unsanitary in the mid-20th century because temperatures could not be precisely controlled. But the compounds in hickory smoke do the same work whether you monitor them with a thermometer or not. Your grandfather knew the smoke was ready when it smelled right. He read that smokehouse the way a doctor reads a chart. He could not name a single phenol. He did not need to. Double frying for extra crispiness was considered wasteful by those who did not understand the science happening in that hot oil. African American cooks knew that frying chicken twice produced a crust that stayed crispy for hours, perfect for church picnics where food sat on tables through long afternoons. Scientists now confirm that the first fry cooks the interior and sets the coating, while the second fry at higher temperature creates a shatteringly crisp exterior with less oil absorption. The technique drives out moisture that would otherwise make coatings soggy. Grandmothers learned through trial what food engineers now study in laboratories. That extra step transformed ordinary fried chicken into legendary fried chicken. What seemed like unnecessary effort was precise technique that single frying simply cannot match. Number 19, raw unpasteurized milk. Before the refrigerated truck and the grocery dairy case, country families drank their milk straight from the cow and they let it sit and sour on purpose. That soured milk became clabber, thick and tangy, spooned up plain or stirred into cornbread and biscuits across the rural South. Real buttermilk came the same honest way. Raw milk was the foundation of half the baking in a poor kitchen, but unpasteurized milk can carry listeria, E. coli, and salmonella, and the sicknesses it caused were severe, sometimes deadly, especially in the young and the old. So the agency drew a hard line. In 1987, the FDA banned the sale of raw milk across state lines, requiring pasteurization for any milk shipped in interstate commerce. The clabber and the true buttermilk did not vanish, but the easy supply of raw milk that fed those traditions was cut off by federal rule, pushing a cornerstone of country cooking to the margins. Hog maw stuffed. The pig stomach, scrubbed in cold water, stuffed with sausage, diced potatoes, cabbage, and onion, sewn shut and baked low for 3 hours until the casing went tender. Pennsylvania Dutch families made it. So did black families across the Carolinas. The dish put a whole meal in one organ and used every cheap ingredient on the kitchen table. Hog maw is mostly muscle protein with collagen woven through it. The dish fell out of favor in the 1980s when grocery stores stopped carrying the stomach at all. Today, nose-to-tail chefs in New York charge $30 a plate to recreate exactly what a cook in Charleston fed 7 children for under 3. The plate is the same. The bill is different. Her name doesn't appear on any of those restaurant menus. She wrote no cookbook. She just kept feeding her people. Number 11, the difference between a good custard pie and a great one often came down to a single small can. Evaporated milk from the shelf with the 2 punched holes in the top was not a shortcut in African American kitchens. It was a deliberate choice. Regular milk carries too much water, and in a custard filling, that excess dilutes the proteins that need to set the pie firm. The result weeps liquid into the crust and won't slice clean. Evaporated milk has had roughly 60% of its water removed, concentrating the proteins and milk sugars until it's nearly twice as rich. African American bakers adopted it in custard pies. Sweet potato, chess, buttermilk, coconut, from at least the 1930s onward, when canned goods became staples in rural Southern households that couldn't count on fresh dairy every week. The silkier texture, the clean edge when cut, none of that came from talent alone. It came from knowing what was in the can and exactly why it worked better than what came out of the bottle. Before anyone called it a crime, there was a kitchen in Harlem where a woman boiled pig feet in a pot so big it took up half the stove. Pig feet were the centerpiece of rent parties, illegal apartment gatherings where tenants charged a quarter at the door and served plates alongside bootleg gin just to make rent. Langston Hughes saved hand-printed party tickets in a red box. The feet simmered for hours in vinegar, onion, garlic, and crushed red pepper until the cartilage turned to silk. They were served on wax paper with hot sauce, eaten standing up because the furniture was pushed against the walls for dancing. The Volstead Act made the gin illegal. Jim Crow made the gathering dangerous, but every Saturday night, those kitchens opened anyway, and the smell drifted through hallways where a fat swaller played piano for a plate and $1. Nobody throws those parties anymore. Placing brown paper bags under fresh baked bread to cool was wisdom passed down through generations of African American bakers. The paper absorbed excess moisture while allowing just enough steam to escape, preventing soggy crust while keeping the interior tender. Modern food scientists now understand this creates perfect humidity balance, maintaining bread quality far better than cooling racks. Grandmothers knew instinctively what laboratories took decades to confirm. The brown paper's porous structure wicked away condensation without removing essential moisture from the crumb. Women saved their grocery bags specifically for this purpose, washing and reusing them until worn thin. Church bake sales featured loaves, cooled this way, their crusts perfectly crisp. Putting a penny in the pot to keep greens green seemed like pure superstition to anyone outside African American kitchens, yet the technique actually worked through basic chemistry. Older copper pennies dropped into simmering greens released trace copper ions into cooking liquid. These ions interacted with chlorophyll molecules, stabilizing their structure and preventing color from turning dull olive during long cooking. Grandmothers noticed greens stayed vibrant and appetizing even after hours of simmering with ham hocks. Modern food science confirms copper does preserve chlorophyll, which is why commercial processors use copper compounds as color stabilizers. This hack proved that observation and experimentation in home kitchens could discover truths laboratory science would later validate.
Boiled peanut soup was a clever way to turn a cheap, plentiful snack into a rich and sustaining meal. Families started with boiled peanuts, soft and savory, then blended them with broth, onions, and sometimes milk to create a creamy soup. It was high in protein and carried a nutty depth that filled bellies when meat was scarce. African American kitchens especially valued peanuts, which had been part of food traditions since arriving from Africa. Children who were used to eating boiled peanuts from paper bags found it surprising to see them turned into soup, but the taste was comforting. For many, it was a dish of invention, born of necessity yet delicious enough to be remembered fondly. Peanut soup showed the creativity of cooks who could stretch a handful of legumes into a meal for an entire family. Though rarely seen today, it reflects the ingenuity of those who could not afford to waste anything. Boiled peanut soup was both survival and celebration, served warm with pride.
Number 15, letting baking soda and buttermilk do the lifting. Old cooks did not trust a tall stack of leavening, and they did not need it. A pinch of soda stirred into the meal, then met with sour buttermilk, set off a quiet chemical rise the moment the two touched. The acid in the buttermilk and the soda fizzed against each other, lifting the crumb just enough to keep it tender without turning it into spongy cake. That is why the batter went into the hot pan fast before the bubbles could fade and flatten. Wait too long and the rise was gone, leaving a dense, heavy bread that sat in your stomach like a stone. Some hands used a little baking powder too, but the buttermilk and soda pairing was the older way, learned back when store leavening was dear and a careful cook stretched every spoonful she had. It also balanced the sour, since the soda took the sharp edge off the tang and left the clean corn flavor behind. The whole reaction cost a pinch of powder and a moment's attention. Stir the soda into the meal, then move quick. Number 23, rendering pork fat on a Sunday and pouring it into a coffee can for the rest of the week. A wood stove in Greenville, Mississippi, 1953. Your big mama cut 3 pounds of fat back into half-inch cubes, dropped them into a heavy pot with a 1/4 cup of water, and let the whole thing simmer over a low flame for 2 hours. The water cooked off, the fat melted out clear as honey. The crackling sank to the bottom, golden and crisp, ready to be salted and snacked on by any grandchild who wandered through. The clear lard went through a square of cheesecloth into a Maxwell house can on the back of the stove. That can fed her family every supper for a week and the next and the next. The thing is, modern science didn't walk back its warnings on lard until around 2010. By then, she'd been cooking with it for 60 years and had never seen the inside of a cardiologist's office. Number 18, hand test in the hot pan with a flick of water. Big Mama did not set the burner and walk away. She tested the pan with her fingers and a drop of water. She would dip the tips of her fingers in the cold water glass next to the stove, shake them once over the dry iron, and watch what the droplets did. If the water vanished with a quiet hiss, the pan was still too cold and the cornbread batter would soak in and stick. If the water beaded up and skittered across the surface like little silver balls before evaporating, the pan was at the right temperature for searing, somewhere over 400 degrees. The drops danced because of what physicists later named the Leidenfrost effect, where the water forms a thin protective layer of steam that lets the bead float on its own vapor cushion. Big Mama had no name for it. She just knew that when the water danced, the pan was ready, and the first piece of meat would hit the iron with the right kind of sizzle. Wrong sizzle meant wrong supper. Stretching meat with oatmeal was how Black grandmothers fed large families when budgets were tight and mouths were many. When making meatloaf, meatballs, or hamburger patties, Grandma mixed oatmeal directly into ground beef, sometimes adding as much filler as meat. The oats absorb meat juices during cooking, staying moist and flavorful, while adding bulk-making portions go further. Children never noticed because texture blended seamlessly and oatmeal actually bound everything together better than breadcrumbs. This trick meant 1 pound of meat could feed twice as many people, a miracle born from necessity and perfected through practice. Grandma understood protein was expensive and creativity was free, combining both to keep her family nourished. Number 16, cane syrup preserving. In the sugarcane belt of Louisiana and the Gulf Coast, Black families poured thick cane syrup over fruits and sometimes meats to preserve them. The syrup's sugar concentration was so high that it pulled water out of any bacteria that landed on the surface, killing them through osmotic pressure. The same principle makes honey one of the only foods that never spoils. Nutritionists in the 20th century dismissed syrup preservation as nothing more than candy making and warned it was too high in sugar to be considered a legitimate food safety practice. But osmotic preservation is now a recognized method in food science. The sugar concentration in cane syrup exceeds 60%, which is well above the threshold needed to prevent microbial growth. Those families were practicing the same science that keeps your store-bought jam safe on the shelf for years. The jar was different, the chemistry was identical. Bringing meat to room temperature before cooking was dismissed as dangerous, food safety violation. Yet, African American cooks pulled their roast from ice boxes an hour before cooking and achieved results cold start methods could not match. Food scientists now confirm that tempered meat cooks more evenly, developing better crusts while staying juicy inside, because heat does not have to overcome extreme temperature differences. Research shows that properly handled meat reaches safe temperatures faster when starting closer to room temperature. Grandmothers knew their chicken fried more evenly, and their roast came out perfectly pink throughout when rested on counters before hitting hot pans. What food safety warnings tried to ban was actually technique that improved both results and safety when practiced correctly. Number 20, small turtles under 4 inches. Snapping turtle and pond turtle were honest food in many southern black households, caught from the creek and cooked into stews and fried turtle that stretched a week's eating. Children kept the tiny ones in dime store bowls, and the small turtle trade boomed in pet shops nationwide. The trouble was salmonella. The little turtles carried it on their shells, and outbreaks of it kept landing children in hospitals across the country. In 1975, the FDA banned the sale of any turtle with a shell under 4 inches long, the size that ended up in a child's hands and then a child's mouth. The rule did not touch the big turtles cooked for the pot, but it gutted the trade in the small ones and reshaped how families could keep them. A creature that had fed and entertained folks for generations got its smallest version pulled from every shelf to stop the spread of a kitchen sickness. Number 17, dandelion greens salad. Every spring, a woman in rural Tennessee walked the back lot with a paring knife in her apron pocket, looking for the young leaves before they bloomed. She cut them low, washed them in cold water, and tossed them with hot bacon grease, cider vinegar, a pinch of sugar, and a hard-boiled egg crumbled on top. Dandelion greens carry more vitamin A per cup than spinach, plus inulin, a prebiotic fiber that feeds the bacteria in your gut. The 1980s called dandelions a lawn problem and recommended weed killer. By 2018, specialty grocers were selling the same leaves for $4 a bunch. Between the 1920s and 1940s, the Southern kitchen slowly divided over pie crust, and the fault line was fat. One side stayed with lard, rendered from pork, used in African American kitchens for generations, its larger fat crystals creating distinct steam pockets that produce a shatteringly flaky texture no other fat can fully replicate. The other side switched to Crisco, marketed since 1911 as cleaner and more wholesome than animal fat. Many black households made the switch, but the ones who kept their leaf lard cold and kept rolling that dough the same way their mothers had, their crusts were different. A slight savory undertone balanced a sweet filling in a way that only lard achieves, and the texture shattered into clean fragments rather than bending. Food scientists eventually confirmed what those bakers already knew: leaf lard, rendered from fat around the pig's kidneys, produces the most tender pastry of any known shortening. The grandmothers knew that 50 years before anyone ran a lab test. Some of them are gone now, and the lard tins went with them. When the first frost hit and the persimmons went soft on the branch, the brewing started. Persimmon beer was older than Prohibition, older than the country, rooted in indigenous American and West African fermentation traditions. Black families gathered the fruit after cold sweetened it, mashed it with wheat, bran, molasses, and water, then let it ferment in crocks until it turned fizzy and tart. The flavor was earthy, sweet, with a tang that caught the back of your throat. The Volstead Act banned beer production at home, even while allowing fruit wine. Persimmon beer fell on the wrong side of that line. What had been a seasonal ritual tied to the rhythm of the land became criminal overnight. Crocs got buried behind barns and hen houses. The recipe got whispered instead of spoken aloud. When the old ones who remembered the right ratio of fruit to grain finally passed on, nobody could ask them to say it one more time. The beer with them. She's placing shoes in the freezer to eliminate odors was a technique African American households employed when commercial deodorizers were unavailable. Grandmothers would seal smelly sneakers in plastic bags and freeze them overnight, returning them odor-free by morning. Scientists now confirm that freezing kills bacteria responsible for foot odor, achieving results no spray could match. The extreme cold destroys bacterial cell walls, eliminating the source rather than masking it. This hack was particularly valuable in households with active children whose shoes took serious punishment. Women would clear freezer space on Sunday nights, treating the family's shoes for the week. The practice demonstrated resourceful thinking using existing appliances. Putting hot peppers in the garden to deter pests was a companion planting technique African American gardeners used to protect vegetables without harsh chemicals. Hot pepper plants grew alongside tomatoes, greens, and other crops, or dried peppers were scattered around garden edges. The capsaicin in hot peppers repels many insects and small animals that would otherwise damage food crops. Rabbits, deer, and many bugs avoid the burning sensation capsaicin causes. Some gardeners also made pepper spray from crushed peppers steeped in water, applying it directly to leaves. Modern agricultural science confirms capsaicin is an effective natural deterrent against numerous garden pests. This technique protected food supplies, using plants families could also eat, doubling the value of garden space.
Grape hull pie was an ingenious way to waste nothing, even after grapes had been pressed for juice or wine. The thick, chewy skins were simmered with sugar and spices, then baked into a pie with a flaky crust. The result was a dessert that was both tart and sweet, carrying the full essence of the grape. For many households, it meant stretching a harvest further, ensuring no part of the fruit was discarded. Children who expected jelly were surprised to find grape skins tucked into pies, yet grew to love their unique flavor. Grape hull pie was common in homesteads where every scrap counted, reflecting a deep respect for the land's bounty. It represented a kind of cooking where thrift and creativity merged, transforming leftovers into tradition. Today, it is rarely seen outside of heritage cookbooks, nearly erased by modern preferences. Yet grape hull pie reminds us of the cleverness of past kitchens where nothing was wasted and every bite carried the flavor of ingenuity.
Number 14, stirring a spoon of bacon drippings into the batter. The grease jar by the stove was not waste, it was seasoning, and a smart cook borrowed from it twice. Besides the fat that went in the pan, a spoonful of warm bacon drippings got stirred right into the batter itself. That carried the smoke and salt of the pork all the way through the bread, so every crumb tasted of the kitchen, not just the crust. It also kept the inside rich and moist, standing in for the butter and oil that money could not always buy. The drippings tin lived right beside the stove, filled a little more after every breakfast, and it was treasure in a poor kitchen. Nothing on that farm went to waste, and the grease saved from morning paid off again at supper. The fat coated the cornmeal, too, which kept the bread from drying out hard and crumbly the next day. A bread made this way needed no butter at all, though it surely got it anyway when there was some to spare. It is a small habit that turned a thin bread into a filling one. Spoon the warm drippings into the batter, and the whole loaf carries the flavor. Number 17, smothering meat in his own, steam under a heavy lid for 90 minutes. A Saturday afternoon in 1952, New Orleans, the rain coming sideways off Lake Pontchartrain. Big Mama browned 6 pork chops in bacon grease, lifted them out, and dropped 2 sliced onions into the same pan. The onions melted. She poured in 2 cups of water, set the chops back in the pan, and clamped the lid down tight. The fire went to a whisper. The meat cooked in its own steam for 90 minutes. The onions broke down into a mahogany gravy. The chops came out tender enough to cut with the side of a fork. Edna Lewis wrote about smothering as the heart of country cooking. The technique wasn't a recipe, it was a relationship between heat, water, and patience. Modern cooks rush the same dish in a slow cooker and wonder why the meat tastes flat. Big Mama could have told them, the lid is the secret, the time is the seasoning, the patience is the love. Number 19, sharpening the kitchen knife on the rim of a plate. The kitchen drawer in Big Mama's house did not contain a sharpening stone because the underside of every dinner plate she owned was already won. When the paring knife started to drag through a tomato instead of slicing it, she would flip an everyday ceramic plate upside down on the counter, find the unglazed ring around the rim where the plate had rested on the kiln, and draw the blade across that bare ceramic at a low angle, 10 or 12 strokes per side. The unglazed clay is harder than carbon steel, hard enough to grind a true edge back onto a dull blade in under a minute. Every black grandmother in the South seemed to know this without ever being told. Some learned it from their own mothers. Some figured it out the first time their best knife went soft. But the move was so common across kitchens that food historians now treat it as a signature of mid-century African-American home cooking. The plate did double duty, and the knife went right back to work. Crisping chicken skin with baking powder was Grandma's answer to achieving shatteringly crisp fried chicken without a deep fryer. She patted chicken pieces completely dry, then dusted them lightly with baking powder mixed into seasoned flour before frying. The baking powder raised the pH of the skin, helping it brown faster and develop tiny bubbles, creating extra crunch. This technique meant skin stayed crispy even after sitting during a long family meal, never turning soggy. Grandma's chicken crackled when you bit into it, giving way to juicy meat beneath that golden armor. She learned this from her own mother, who discovered it through trial and error in a kitchen without modern conveniences. It remains a simple addition, making an enormous difference. Number 15, salt brine, fish preservation. Along the rivers and coastlines of the South, Black families caught more fish than they could eat in a single day. Catfish, bream, crappie, whatever the river offered. But without refrigeration, fish spoiled faster than almost any other food. So the surplus went into a crock of heavily salted water, packed tight with enough salt to make the brine feel thick on your fingers. The brine penetrated the flesh and dropped the water activity to a level where spoilage organisms could not survive. When your family needed protein, you pulled a piece from the brine, soaked it in fresh water to draw out the excess salt, and cooked it as if it had come straight from the river. Fried saltfish with grits and onions was a breakfast that fed families along the Carolina coast for generations. Regulators said home brining was inconsistent and risky. Modern food scientists confirmed that salt concentrations above 10% effectively halt bacterial growth. The women who packed fish in crocks every summer did not measure water activity. They tasted the brine. If it was salty enough to pucker your lips, it was salty enough to keep the fish safe. The tongue was their instrument. Frying oil multiple times was condemned as unhealthy practice that accumulated harmful compounds. Yet African American cooks knew their oil actually improved with use. Food scientists now confirm that properly strained oil develops seasoning that enhances flavor, while the first fry removes moisture that causes degradation. Research shows that oil used 2 or 3 times produces better browning and crispier coatings than fresh oil because surface tension changes improve heat transfer. Grandmothers strained the oil through cheesecloth after each use, storing it for the next batch of fried chicken. The practice stretched expensive ingredients while improving results. What seemed like dangerous frugality was technique that professional kitchens employ, recognizing seasoned oil delivers superior fried food. Number 25, tonka bean. Long before vanilla got cheap, cooks reached for tonka bean and the coumarin inside it to flavor custards, puddings, and the imitation vanilla that sweetened many a Sunday cake. It carried a warm scent, somewhere between vanilla and almond and fresh-cut hay, and a few drops went a long way in a poor kitchen. It turned up in cheap flavoring extracts sold right off the grocery shelf, a way for our grandmothers to stretch a little sweetness across a big family. Then the science turned. Researchers tied coumarin to liver damage in animals, and in 1954, the Food and Drug Administration banned it outright as a food additive. The extracts vanished, and the small brown bottles that once sat beside the sugar were quietly pulled from the shelves. Most cooks never knew the name of the thing they had been stirring in. Tonka bean was one of the first flavors Washington decided our kitchens could no longer keep. Pickled pig feet, a glass jar on the counter at every corner store in black neighborhoods from Detroit to Houston, pink brine, white vinegar, peppercorns, and a clove of garlic. The feet were boiled 3 hours soft, then submerged in the brine for a week before they were ready. An old man in Detroit in 1974 walked in on his way home from the night shift, asked the man behind the counter for a pig foot in waxed paper, ate it, standing on the corner before he caught the bus. Pig feet are almost pure collagen, the same structural protein your skin and your joints are built from. The 1990s diet culture treated the food as a punchline. The 2020s wellness aisle now sells collagen powder by the pound for $50 a tub. The protein is the same, the packaging is different. He thought he was buying a snack. He was buying what your vitamin shelf now charges $50 for. He just paid 60 cents. Number 10, the biscuits demanded improvisation, and the tool was already on the table. In nearly every African-American kitchen from the 1930s through the 1960s, there was a wide, heavy drinking glass with a second job nobody discussed. It just was the biscuit cutter, used so long that a faint ring of flour had worn into the rim. You press straight down, never twist it. Twisting seals the cut edges and prevents the layers from rising, and the glass left a clean circle that baked into exactly the size that kitchen had always made. The no twist rule is technical. A clean edge lets steam escape straight up through the open layers, creating the visible separation you can pull apart with your hands. The glass had the right rim. The woman pressing it knew the physics, even if she never used that word. If you did not grow up picking muscadines off the vine in late summer, you would never understand the wine. Thick, sweet, almost musky, with skin so tough you popped each grape between your teeth before the juice ran out. In black households across the South, muscadine wine was as common as sweet tea. The grapes grew wild on fences from Virginia to Texas, and winemaking was simple: crushed grapes, sugar, water, thyme. No yeast needed because the wild bloom on the skins did the work. The Volstead Act permitted fruit wine at home, but enforcement was selective. Agents who let white folk press wine in California raided black homes in Georgia over a single jug. So muscadine moved to the back of the pantry. The jug got a label that said vinegar. Sunday dinner kept its sweetness quietly behind closed doors. Using newspaper to clean windows was a technique perfected in African American households long before commercial glass cleaners existed. Grandmothers would crumple sheets of black and white newsprint, dampen them with vinegar water, and rub glass surfaces until they sparkled without streaks. The secret lay in the newspaper's dense fiber structure and petroleum-based ink, which acted as a mild abrasive and polish simultaneously. Scientists have since confirmed that carbon in printer's ink creates a film that repels dust and water. This hack costs nothing, since newspapers were typically free or already in the home. Children learned this technique watching mothers transform smudged windows into crystal clear panes with nothing but yesterday's headlines. Adding a pinch of sugar to tomato sauces was automatic in African American kitchens, where grandmothers understood balance even without formal culinary training. Just a small amount, rarely more than a teaspoon per pot, went into tomato-based dishes, from stewed tomatoes to red gravy to barbecue sauce. Sugar did not make the sauce taste sweet, but cut the harsh acidity tomatoes naturally contain, creating smoother, rounder flavor. This technique was especially important with canned tomatoes, which can taste sharp without adjustment. Modern food science explains that sugar molecules interact with acid molecules on the tongue, reducing perception of sourness without eliminating bright tomato flavor. Professional chefs call this balancing acidity, something African American cooks achieved through generations of tasting.
Ground acorn flour. Bread was a survival food born from foraging, using acorns gathered in the fall to make flour. Families would crack the nuts, leach them in water to remove bitterness, then grind them into meal. Mixed with cornmeal or wheat flour, the acorn flour became hearty loaves of bread with a nutty flavor. Though labor-intensive, it provided sustenance when store-bought flour was too costly or scarce. Children often joined in shelling acorns, their hands stained from the tannins, while adults handled the soaking and grinding. The bread itself was dense and filling, a reminder that the forest could feed families if they had the patience to prepare it. For many, it was a food of hard times, eaten more out of necessity than delight. Today, it is almost forgotten, except among foragers or survivalists. Yet ground acorn flour bread reflects the ingenuity of past generations who made the land itself their pantry. It was resilience baked into every loaf, proof that nothing was overlooked.
Number 12, resting the batter so the meal drinks the liquid. Patience showed up again here, in a step most modern cooks skip. After the batter was mixed, a good cook let it sit a few minutes while the pan came up to heat. That rest gave the coarse cornmeal time to drink in the buttermilk and soften, instead of staying gritty and dry in the middle of the bread. The grains swelled and the batter thickened, which made for a crumb that held together tender rather than crumbling apart on the plate. With stone ground meal especially, that soaking time mattered, since the rough grind needed a minute to relax and take on the liquid. The weight also let the leavening get going, so the batter went in already lively. Cooks judged it by feel, knowing the batter was ready when it had thickened just enough to mound softly on a spoon. Rushing the bowl into a cold pan undid all of it, leaving a gritty, fallen bread. 2 old steps, a screaming pan, and a rested batter worked hand in hand toward the same loaf. Let the meal sit and drink before it ever seized the iron. Number 18, finishing the gravy with a tablespoon of cold butter swirled in off the heat. A Thanksgiving morning in 1957, Charlotte, the roasting pan held 2 cups of dark drippings and a slurry of flour and water whisked smooth. Big Mama brought it to a simmer, scraped every brown bit off the bottom, and turned the burner off. Then she dropped a cold pat of butter, half the size of a matchbox, into the center of the gravy and swirled the pan in a slow circle. The butter melted as it moved, The fat coated the starch molecules. The gravy turned glossy and thick, the kind of finish a French chef would call mounted with butter and charge you $80 for at a hotel. Big Mama called it the last shine. She did the same thing to the pot liquor, the red-eyed gravy, and the pan sauce. The trick cost 3 cents and made every plate look like the cover of a magazine. Number 16, rescuing scorched milk with cold tap water and a clean pan. A pot of milk that turned its back on you for 30 seconds could fill the whole house with a burnt smell that lingered for days. Big Mama did not throw it out. She lifted the scorched pot off the heat, set it straight into a sink of cold tap water without stirring, and waited 2 full minutes. The cold shock kept the burnt layer welded to the bottom of the pot instead of mixing up into the rest of the milk. Then she gently poured the still good milk off the top into a fresh, clean pan and finished cooking it without a hint of scorch. The trick saved gravy, it saved oatmeal, it saved more pots of grits than any son or daughter cared to count, and the burnt pot soaked overnight in baking soda water came clean by morning. Thickening stews with okra was a technique rooted in West African cooking traditions that Black grandmothers carried across generations. When gumbo or stew needed body without flour or cornstarch, Grandma sliced fresh okra and added it to the simmering pot. As the okra cooked, it released natural mucilage that thickened the liquid into a silky, rich consistency. This wasn't just about texture, but about honoring culinary heritage stretching back centuries across the Atlantic. The okra added its own subtle flavor, earthy and green, complementing seafood, chicken, and sausage beautifully. Grandma knew exactly when to add it and how long to cook it, controlling thickness through timing alone. This ancient technique required just knowledge, passed through generations of cooks. Number 14, rendered tallow coating. Beef tallow, rendered slowly from suet until clear and golden, was poured over cheese wheels, sausage links, and dried meats to create a waxy seal that blocked air and moisture. The tallow hardened at room temperature into a firm barrier, like a coat of armor that kept food usable for months. A sausage link sealed in tallow could sit on a cellar shelf through an entire winter and come out tasting nearly the same as the day it was made. The seal was so complete that you had to crack it apart with your hands before you could slice the meat inside. Health departments called this outdated once refrigeration became affordable, but tallow coating works on the same principle as vacuum sealing. It creates an oxygen-free environment that prevents oxidation and stops aerobic bacteria from growing. You can still find artisan cheese makers in Vermont using wax coatings for the same reason. The difference is that they charge a premium for it. Your grandmother gave it away. Cooking dried corn instead of fresh was seen as settling for inferior ingredients when frozen options filled grocery stores. African American cooks knew that drying concentrated flavors and nutrients that fresh corn lost within hours of picking. Scientists now confirm that dried corn contains higher levels of resistant starch that feeds beneficial gut bacteria. Research shows that the drying process also makes certain antioxidants more bioavailable than fresh kernels provide. Grandmothers kept jars of dried corn in pantries, rehydrating it for stews and succotash that tasted richer than any fresh version. The technique preserved summer harvests through winter, months when nutrition was hardest to find. What seemed like making do without modern convenience was actually superior preservation. Number 17, lead glazed earthenware. The handsome clay pots and bean crocks that came up from Mexico and out of old country kilns carried a danger nobody could see. That bright glassy glaze got its shine from lead, and when it was not fired hot enough, the lead never fully fused. Pour something acidic into one, a pot of beans, a stew with tomato, a jug of tea left to sit, and the lead leached straight into the food. Families used these vessels for years, prizing them for their looks, never knowing they were seasoning every meal with poison. Lead does its worst damage to children and the unborn, dulling the mind in ways that never come back. The FDA moved to block it, prohibiting any cookware that leaches lead from being sold or imported, and ordering tainted pottery seized at the border. A pot that looked like heritage and beauty turned out to be a slow poison pulled from the shelves to protect the youngest at the table. Jessica B. Harris, the food historian, has written that this is the cycle of African American foodways. What the family ate became what the family was told to stop eating, became what the food world rediscovered, always in that order. The woman in Tennessee never stopped. She kept walking the same back lot with the same paring knife in the same apron pocket every spring for 60 years. The bowl of milk sat there for an hour, the liver submerged and slowly losing its edge. This was not fussiness, it was chemistry. Liver carries high concentrations of myoglobin, the iron-rich protein responsible for the metallic bitterness that puts people off organ meat, and milk's casein proteins bind to those bitter compounds and pull them away during the soak. What comes out of the milk bath is noticeably milder, with a cleaner flavor that accepts seasoning without fighting it. African American cooks across the South had practiced this for generations, reaching back to at least the early 20th century, when liver was among the cheapest proteins available, sold near free by butchers who considered it a throwaway cut, transformed into something worth eating by black cooks who wasted nothing. Some households used buttermilk in place of plain milk, adding acid to the process that drew out even more bitterness while tenderizing the exterior. Nobody learned this from a cookbook. You learned it by watching, by being told once, and by understanding that the knowing was not the same as the doing. In the 1920s, when Southern game laws tightened on rural black communities, rabbit hunting moved to the dark hours. The stew was not fancy: quartered rabbit, browned in lard, simmered with onions, potatoes, and herbs that grew along the fence line. But it held defiance in every bite. Rabbits bred fast and lived everywhere, the most democratic protein in the South. A box trap from scrap wood and a handful of clover would do. But regulations required licenses, and in Alabama and Mississippi, wardens used those laws to control black movement off tenant farms. A man caught with a rabbit and no license could be jailed, which often meant convict labor. So the hunts moved to moonless nights, traps set where no warden walked. The women who cooked that stew never asked where the rabbit came from. They seasoned the pot and fed the household. That silence was his own kind of grace. That's all 60. If your grandmother or your auntie used any of these tricks, drop her name in the comments and let her get the credit she always deserved. If there's a cooking secret from your family's kitchen that we missed, write it down below, because somebody out there needs to hear it. Hit subscribe if you haven't already, because next time we're going even deeper into the recipes the food industry tried to bury. Until then, keep that skillet seasoned and that kitchen alive.